All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're tackling a huge question, one that affects pretty much everyone. Where do our best ideas actually come from? We're going to explore a completely different way of looking at this, something pretty radical. So seriously, where do they come from? For most of us, it feels kind of like magic, right? You get that random flash of brilliance in the shower, or you just get lucky, that big eureka moment. But what if I told you it's not random at all? What if there's a system you can actually learn? You know, it really boils down to two totally different ways of thinking. On one side, you've got the old view, ideas are random, and we're just kind of sitting around waiting for inspiration to hit. But on the other side, there's this framework called ideas as packets, which says idea generation is an active, systematic process. It's really the difference between waiting for it to rain and knowing how to dig a well. Okay, so first things first, we've got to bust a major myth. This whole idea of inspiration. For centuries, we've been told this romantic story about the eureka moment. But what if that story is actually holding us back? Let's talk about why you don't have to wait for great ideas and how you can learn to produce them instead. And look, we've all been there. It feels great when an idea just sort of shows up. But the material we're digging into today suggests that this belief, as common as it is, might be the very thing keeping us from our real creative and intellectual potential.
So, if the flash of inspiration model is broken, what's the alternative? Let's check out a completely new way of thinking. What if, instead of seeing ideas as these mysterious sparks, we started seeing them as something way more tangible, something we can actually work with?
And here's the core of it. In this framework, an idea is basically an information packet. It shows up, sure, but it's not the final product. It's raw material. So your job isn't to wait for it, your job is to grab it and then get to work processing it.
And this is where the idea gets really big. If ideas are packets, then the entire world is the delivery system. Think about that. It's not just a random collection of events and things. It's a carefully designed school, a curriculum that's constantly sending us these little packets of information to learn from.
Okay, that's a huge concept. So how do we make it practical? Well, it all comes down to a simple, really powerful analogy that makes this whole framework so much easier to remember.
And here it is, the humble pomegranate. I want you to think of any new idea or piece of information like a whole pomegranate. It arrives as a complete package, right? But not all of it is actually valuable. Your job is to figure out how to get to the good stuff, the juice, without eating the bitter peel.
This brings us to the key action, which this framework calls the pressing. It's the process of taking that information packet, that pomegranate, and squeezing it to get what's valuable. You're applying critical thought, you're analyzing it, all to separate the nourishing insight from the useless noise that comes with it.
And this turns the whole metaphor into a real step-by-step system. It's so simple. First, you just receive the information, no judgment. Then you examine it. Then you apply that pressure. You press it to find the core truth. You collect that insight. And finally, you share it, which actually helps you understand it even better.
So when you're doing all this pressing, what are you actually looking for? Well, to figure that out, the framework makes this really critical distinction. It's about learning to separate the packaging from the prize, and it uses two concepts, truth versus truthfulness.
This just illustrates it perfectly. The framework calls the entire package truthfulness, or El-Sidq. That's the whole pomegranate, the peel, the bitter stuff, the seeds, everything. But truth, or El-Haq, that's just the juice. It's the pure, valuable essence that you're really after. The goal is to get the juice without having to eat the peel.
Let's make this super practical. A truthful statement could be, "This stock market crashed." That's a fact. It's truthful. But if you press that fact, you might find the underlying truth, which is, an economic system based on usury is mathematically unstable. See the difference? The first one is just an event. The second is a deep, systemic principle you can actually learn from and act on. That's the power of pressing.
And this focus on principles instead of just events has massive consequences. When we only react to the truthfulness, the thing we can easily measure, like a stock market crash, we get stuck just fixing symptoms. But when we look for the truth, that deeper principle, we can start building systems designed for real, long-term growth.
So how do we actually turn this from a cool theory into something we do every day? Let's look at how this framework builds a repeatable system for learning and thinking way more effectively. So what's in it for you? Well, for starters, you're going to generate way better ideas because you're learning to look for principles, not just surface-level events. You'll also learn more effectively because you'll know how to filter the signal from the noise.
and you'll get better at protecting your own knowledge from misinformation. Best of all, you can apply this every single day, turning every single challenge into a chance to learn.
You know, this framework also maps out the entire learning journey. It all starts at stage 1 with awareness, just realizing you don't know something. Then you move through stages like processing, where you're sorting truth from error. By stage 5, you're at integration, where you start seeing how different ideas connect. And you end up at stage 7, expansion, where you're ready to teach others and grow your own impact.
And that's really the ultimate point here. This isn't just some interesting theory. It's about fundamentally changing your relationship with knowledge. You stop being a passive consumer of information and become an active creator of insight. You're building an engine for generating ideas, not just hoping lightning strikes.
And that brings us to the final and maybe the most profound shift in thinking this framework offers. What's our role in this whole system of information packets?
The ultimate paradigm shift is right here. The world isn't just a place you live in. It's a curriculum you participate in. Your primary job isn't just to exist, but to learn. Every conversation, every news story, every problem you face, it's an information packet, a lesson designed just for you. So I'll leave you with this question. Think about all the information flying at you today, the articles, the feedback from your team, the challenges at home. Try not to see them as just noise. See them as pomegranates. What valuable juice is waiting inside for you to extract? What are you going to press today?